We are honoured to be joined by a very special guest here on BFC TV today, and that is the one and only Laura Woods. Laura, hello. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. It's great to have you here with us today. We're going to have a little chat now about all kinds of things, really. But first and foremost, you've come here and you've had the tour from the CEO, Mark Hammond.
Yeah.
What was your impression on what you've seen?
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. I said to him at the time, I haven't seen very many football clubs, if any, with classrooms in the way that's set up for the academy, the integration between the teams, the men's and women's, the staff, the facilities. I think it's brilliant. Yeah, I've loved my little tour. It's been very cool.
And two other people, aside from your family who are here today
Yeah.
as well, two other people joined us on the tour, Jan and George Wakeling, and of course you have a connection with them, don't you?
Yeah, George and Jan. So my granddad is Jan's brother, Ernie, and he was an amazing man. And so I've obviously known Jan and George, they're in my family all my life. And yeah, we used to hang around together all the time when we were younger with their kids as well. So technically George is my great uncle and Jan is my great auntie. And when we were kids, we used to think George was a gangster because, you know, like the way he is. So yeah, they're family, yeah.
Well, you've heard as well, actually, what a legend George is here. He's the current club ambassador and, of course, was a manager back in the day as well. And he is of legendary status here.
I know. Do you know what? When I speak to people about George in the industry, so back in the day, probably not even that long ago, actually, probably about 4 years ago, I would say, I was interviewing Mikel Antonio and we were talking about Tooting and Mitcham and I said, do you know George by any chance? And he was like, oh my God, do I know George? And then Rio's talking to Rio on Champions League nights as well and he was like, George is your uncle? He went, he's very well thought of. And I was like, that's really nice to hear, yeah.
Let's talk a bit about your career, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
and how it all started for you. I mean, growing up as a child, was broadcasting what you wanted to do, or did you have anything else that you were looking at going into?
I wanted to be a vet when I was really young, but that went out the window because I wasn't great at science and I was very distracted at school, so you needed like really excellent grades. My grades weren't that bad, but they weren't good enough. But I wanted to be like a press packer. Do you remember Newsround? When I used to watch Newsround when I was younger, I was like, oh, that looks really good. And I used to apply and I never got picked. And then we were all sporty families, so sport was always there and we loved that side of things. And as I got a little bit older, I liked writing. So it was the journalistic side of things originally. And then I started to combine the two at university and I was like, this is really great. Got work experience at Sky and then really pushed for a long time to get into broadcasting. And at times I wasn't really sure if it was going to work. And then bang, one day it just started to happen. And then it snowballed, and yeah, here we are. And
as a child, you said your love for sport grew then. What was it that made your love for sport come about, and were there any particular sports you enjoyed playing at all?
Yeah, when we were really young, I think the reason sport was important for us is because my mum decided, I've got two big brothers, and my mum decided that was a way to keep us all, I guess, in an eye line, you know, so she knew where we all were at all times, and it was like a community thing for us, so she put us in the rugby club in Caterham. That was where we all started, Old Caterhamians, and we all played rugby. Mum was a coach, she trained to be a coach, she trained to be a referee, and it was brilliant to us, but it wasn't just about, I mean, we loved playing, but the community aspect of it was really big for us because it was a new-ish place that we lived. So we made friends for life, really. And yeah, it was special. Those memories are really special to us. And then as I grew up through school, we didn't have facilities to play football as girls, so we could play it as a one-off like game in PE, for example. But when we got to secondary school, it was things like hockey and netball that you could play as a girl. But football is something that I think for our family, for especially my family, a lot of my young memories are centred around Arsenal and England, Euros, World Cups and things like that. So yeah, it was always a hub for our family, I think, sport.
Looking back at your early days when you realised journalism and broadcasting was something you wanted to go into, who did you kind of look up to and who did you idolise?
Gabby, for me, was always like the one. And I always say it wasn't because she was a girl. I think I looked at her and recognised, obviously, that because she's a woman, I could almost see myself in those shoes. But I still really love the way Gabby broadcasts because I just feel like she's she's controlled but relaxed at the same time. She has so much authority, but she's still very warm. And I think the human traits of broadcasting are what I never really realised when I was younger that I picked up on. And now that I'm old enough to recognise those individual traits and kind of say, oh, what is it that I like about that broadcaster? Now I realise that it's that intimate relationship you can have with the camera that then goes on to the viewer. I think those things are really important. So Gabby was a big one for me, yeah.
How does it feel now, almost kind of being in those shoes and knowing that young women and men as well are looking up to you and your broadcasting achievements?
I don't know, I'm still really naive to it. I understand it fully, but I don't know, I still feel like once I finish work, I go home, I get on the sofa, I eat crisps and chocolate all night, and it's not glamorous for me at all. And I know the way it looks like a really glamorous career, and it is great. Like, it's just not glamorous. So I do feel a bit of a weight of responsibility to, I guess, like the next generation that are coming through and the one after that, because yeah, it's not always plain sailing in this industry. So I do feel a responsibility to help out or pass things on or make the industry a better place while I'm in it. I think that's really important as well, a level playing field, and just to make it really easy to get on with when you're in it. Because I think if you work really hard in the industry, it can give you so much back. But at the beginning of when I started, there were difficult things and there were things that had to change, and I feel like in the moment it's in a much better place, yeah.
Going back, you talked there about your journey into broadcasting side of things, not just journalism, and you didn't know if it was going to come off or not. Was there a moment you look back at as being that pivotal moment where it changed for you, where this all started?
Yeah, I always remember I was at the gym and I was on a running machine and I was thinking about making a YouTube video. Because I couldn't get given an opportunity. I was in Sky, but I was working as a producer, so I'd come in as a runner and I was doing all the jobs behind the cameras, and I loved it. It was brilliant and it kept me happy for a long time, but it wasn't enough for me. I started producing and I was like, this is great, but it's not my passion. It didn't give me like a buzz or anything. And then I remember thinking, I was on the running machine and I was like, oh, if I just give it one more push. I'd almost decided before that, I'm just going to be a producer and that's me done. And then I was thinking, if I just give it one more push, go and make a YouTube video. I decided to make it on darts because I was obsessed with the darts and I was working on it at the time. And so I was working on the Premier League. We'd had the Worlds that year, whatever year it was. And I was like, right, I'm going to go and interview the darts players, but in like quite a laid back fashion. So I hated the standard post-match interview because I never felt like you got a lot out of them because the environment was so sanitized and it has to be about the game and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask them stupid questions like Andy Hamilton. I did him a quiz on hammers. Like, it was ridiculous. But it was fun, and it was like, you just got to see a bit more of their personality. And for me, that worked better for my interview style as well. I didn't always want to be serious. So I started doing that, and I got a real taste for it. People liked it. I got a bit more confidence. Because I was really bad when I started. Like, everyone's bad. It's a really unnatural position to be sat in front of a camera and say, like, be really normal and act natural. It's hard to do that. So you need to give yourself, it's like miles in a car. You need to just practice. And I was like, oh my God, I got this buzz that I hadn't felt in any other job before. And then it started snowboarding and people were giving me opportunities, and I did a lot of work away from, I had a full-time job at Sky as a producer. I did a lot of work away from that, either for free or in my spare time. And yeah, I don't regret any of it. I think the more work you get, the better you get at it. And I just said yes to everything, yeah.
And touching on that, putting in the hours, or not necessarily paid work, like you referred to there, would you say there are many challenges you've had across your career in broadcasting? Yeah,
just like the amount of no's you get and the amount of like negative feedback. You get more negative feedback than you will positive because we're in the age of social media. So you're putting yourself out there and you're young, inexperienced, you're very vulnerable, your emotions are like laid bare, and you're essentially saying like, here's me on screen, I hope these people like me, and you've got people commenting being like, wow, she's terrible, and then you start to think, oh my God, am I terrible? So you do have to overcome all those kind of things, and there was a part of me that took a lot of that on board when I was younger. Now I'm better at being like, I don't read it, or I don't care, and if I see something, I'm like, that's not going to bother me for more than a minute. Whereas back in the day, I'd sit there and I'd be like in bed thinking, wow, that person said that about me 3 weeks ago and I'm still thinking about it. So yeah, you have to overcome a lot of like your own inner demons, I think, and just try and find the confidence from somewhere, but really put in the work, like push through those uncomfortable moments. I had the worst memory. I still do have the worst memory in the world. I am terrible at autocue, so I made a career of going round those jobs where I could not read the autocue. I sat in like it was awful. It was a screen test at Sky Sports News, and then I started reading the autocue, and I couldn't get through one line. And then I went home and I was like, broadcasting is not for me. And that was one of the early things in my career before I had my last shot at making it, where I was like, it put me off for about a year. Couldn't do it. I was just like, oh, that's killed my confidence. So yeah, you have to push through a lot of different things. I'm much better at those things now because I think they are all wrapped up in your own restrictions. Like you are just so like, crippled by lack of confidence, or I was at least, that was the biggest barrier I think that I needed to get over, yeah.
You've interviewed and worked with some of the best managers, most famous players, managers, talent on and off the field in the world. But does Laura Woods ever get starstruck?
Only with George Wakelin.
That goes for us all, I think.
Yeah, only George. I still think he's a gangster. Do I ever get stuck? Yeah, all the time. The worst position I think I have ever been in was when I first interviewed Jose Mourinho. It was when he was at Manchester United. It was just before they went to play Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, and Conte was the manager there. And there was this big thing, Jose versus Conte. Jose going back to the bridge. We weren't allowed to ask any questions about Conte or Chelsea. There were so many restrictions in this interview. And I sat down and everyone was on edge, like the press officer, the camera crew, the sound man. I was sat there on this chair and I was like, I could feel myself breathing because I was like, oh, I'm so aware of everything and not wanting to make a mistake. And we sat down and I asked him the first question. And it felt like an eternity between my question finishing and then him answering. And I wasn't starstruck in like a, oh, wow way. I was starstruck in like a, like, don't do anything wrong. And it was early days of my reporting as well. So there was like good starstruck and bad starstruck. Ray Parlour, when I first met him, I was like, that's Ray. I was so excited to meet him. But yeah, I still get it all the time.
We've actually got Ray coming for an evening with Ray Parlour
even now.
in a few days' time. No, can you imagine if he just walked in? Yeah, ladies and gents. Just wanted to touch on as well your time with TNT. We've been fortunate enough to have National League coverage from TNT, and actually, I think we've been on 4 or 5 times this season already, which is fantastic. How have you found your time there so far?
They're great. Yeah, there was that was probably I've never really, apart from when I got the breakfast show job. That was like the most attention I've ever got for getting a job before. So I was like, oh my God, I felt very, I felt nervous about just getting it started because I felt like there was such a lot of press around that one move that I really felt like, oh my God, I need to live up to it now. And I'd never worked with Rio before. He was like one of the only pundits in the whole industry that I'd never worked with. And he was lovely, and TV's very similar. Any real company that you go to, any of the big companies, they are all very similar behind the scenes. So once you meet everyone, you realise it's exactly the same. All those nerves go, and they're such a nice group. And so you'll know Becky Ives down here.
Yes,
you must do, yeah. Becky's amazing. Some of the reporters, some of the presenters are just brilliant. So yeah, I've settled in really well. And of course, Ali came with me. So it didn't feel like 100 miles from different.
I was going to say that as well with Talksport. Certainly, I remember waking up to that show every day. Absolutely loved it. It's just over 3 years, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and I remember your last day actually, and it was got quite emotional with Ali and Gabby Bonlaw, didn't it?
Yeah, I did. I felt very emotional. I'd made my decision a lot earlier in the season, probably around Christmas. I started to think like, oh, I can't keep up with this. It was just hard because it was early mornings on the breakfast show, and then I'd go and do games in the evening sometimes, and I'd do boxing at the weekends late at night, and your schedule, it's shift work essentially, you know, you're up here and down here. And I really am not a morning person, but it was my favourite job. So it was a real battle to try and decide what to do. And for a long time, I was coming to that decision myself. It felt like a breakup. I was almost kind of going through it all in my head. And I was coming in the mornings and thinking, nobody knows that I want to leave. And I felt really guilty about that. And I just loved the team. I loved the listeners. I loved the 6 a.m. club. It was just a really intimate job that I just don't think I'm ever going to replicate that. Radio is very different to TV. It's so personal, and live radio as well, where you've got messages coming through instantly and you're just having a laugh with your mate, Ali. So I will forever miss it, I know that, but for my health, I'm in a much more healthy place now. So yeah, it needed to be done, I think.
Very broad question for you now.
Yeah.
What is your favourite thing about your job?
Oh, unpredictability. Yeah, I just think I've never turned up to work and been bored, and I've never sat there and gone, right, I know exactly what's going to happen today. Especially working in the Premier League, it is so unpredictable. And I just think like there is an element of live sport you will not get anywhere else either. People always used to say, do you prefer radio or do you prefer TV? And I love the mixture of it, but live sport is so unique because you're sitting there and you do feel very lucky every time you do it. It doesn't really matter what match you do, and for a long time it didn't really matter what sport I covered either, because you're so transfixed by what's happening. And you can plan an outcome, and then in the last minute that changes. And that's a nightmare, by the way. Like, that just drives me mad. But you wouldn't have it any other way, because I don't know what's going to happen today at work. And I sit there and I look at the fans sometimes as well, and I spend a lot of the time watching what they're doing, and I listen to their chants, and I just think, wow, this is a really, really lucky position for me to be in. And I think one day when I retire, I don't know, I will really miss that. I will really miss that element of trying to broadcast the emotion or the feeling that is in the stands at that moment. I think that's a real privilege for us, yeah.
It's a real sense of community, isn't it? And we've seen it here today. You know, we had our children from 18 months up, by the way, on the pitch this morning, 8 o'clock, up until 1 with our Pan Disability group.
Wow.
Training on the same pitch that their first team heroes will be playing on at 3 o'clock.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Have you scouted an 18-month-old yet?
That's our next job. So the manager floats around on the balcony, waiting for the next talent to come out.
How would you know? That's so good.
And also something to touch on in the community sense is the Women and Girls pathway, which Mark was speaking to you about earlier. We've got a full-time head of Women and Girls, and the idea is very much to make the women's match day exactly the same as the men's match day, and that's the way it should be, isn't it?
Oh, it's so special. I've always thought creating a norm, a new norm, is half the battle. And I think that you grow up in certain generations and you just assume the way something is in that generation is gospel, but it's not. It's just, that's a kind of social construct. And I think, or I've noticed, people, we were speaking about this earlier on, people just don't like change a lot of the time. But when you do make change and then people get used to that change, they absolutely love it. And I've seen such a shift in women's football. Of course, you still get a lot of negativity from like certain sways of society, but having that equal footing and the same opportunities, the same facilities to see exactly how much something can grow, I think it will, and I think it already has, just sparked a huge growth in that area and a huge interest as well. Like people are watching and really encouraged by it. And I remember doing the Women's World Cup over the summer, and my nieces and nephews were watching it and they loved it. And it was very heartwarming because we watched that game week in, week out, and we know the lack of facilities that these women have played with and these girls, and the lack in the grassroots area as well. So it's very heartwarming to see. It's very promising, but it's no surprise to me at all. But I like the way that you guys have the men's and the women's integrated in that way, because I think, again, you create a new norm and then people will go, yeah, that's just normal to us. And that's all I think women's football wants. It doesn't really want to be spoken about in a way where it's patronising or, oh yeah, we'll give them a shot. Well, no, that's not what they want. They just want normality. Like, talk about it like a normal football game, that's fine. Just don't single it out as oh, it's because they're women or anything like that. I don't think that's what anybody wants. So yeah, it's growing and it's no surprise to me at all.
And as we've said, you're here with your family today.
Yeah.
You're going to be up in the exec club and you're going to be watching the match as well.
Oh, really?
Looking forward to that?
I want to go in the stands, actually.
Absolutely.
Do you think I can just, do you think I can dip
We'll get
them?
the scarf out,
Yeah.
we'll get the drum out.
I want to go in the standing side over there, actually.
Well, you talked about the chants, maybe you can start a few chants today.
A clean one, of course.
Of course, yeah, of course. Just before we finish,
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on something which is a bit unusual,
Yeah.
and that is that we have launched our new home kit, which is just behind us here.
I can't believe
mid-season.
this.
And the boys are playing in it today.
How unique is that? And how funny that it's today. I love it. So this is the first day they're going to be playing in it?
It is, yes.
Oh, right. It's lovely. I like the neck as well. I do like the round neck because it looks very beautiful. It's very clean, very beautiful. It gives me a little bit like Real Madrid vibes, maybe.
Got the gold
Is that what
numbers
you're
on the
going
back
for?
as well.
Is it
yeah,
really?
that's it. You've
Very
sussed it
nice.
out. You've sussed it
I
out.
wonder. No, it looks brilliant. Oh, wow. And are they all right mid-season changing? The
Yes,
care?
yeah, there's a bit of a process that happens with it.
Yeah.
We've got through that process, and here we are with the brand new kit today, on sale in the club
I was
shop.
going to say, is it on sale today as well?
It is on sale today,
Oh,
so let's see if
wow.
we have a sellout today.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I might buy one.
There we go.
I don't want a freebie, I want to buy it. Yeah,
There we
that's
go.
very cool. Oh.
Laura, it's been such a privilege to be joined by you today.
thank you
Thank
for
you
having me.
so much for your time.
Oh, lovely to meet you. I'm enjoying it. Fingers crossed for a win, eh?
Thank you again. Fingers crossed.